Hello and welcome to my reading vlog. I'm Chanel. This is all going to be condensed in one vlog because I have not filmed for over a week as my children have been home sick, so I have already done all my week's worth of reading, and I'm just going to tell you about the books that I did read. So first up we have Bizarre. So this is a non-fiction book about peculiar cases of human behavior, or in other words, psych popcorn. You know, if you like really entertaining psychology cases, this book is for you. It is not serious, it's not scientific and in-depth, it's just very entertaining. So there were instances of, there's a syndrome called Cotard's syndrome, which I've never heard of before, in which people think they're dead. So there was a woman who believed that she was dead and she couldn't understand why her family weren't burying her, and she was irate until they ended up acquiescing to her demands and gave her a funeral. But and even though that appeased her for a time, eventually once again she was like, I'm dead, why am I not being buried? So it's a syndrome where people think they're actually deceased, or they have no organs in their body, or they're not human anymore. It's really bizarre. They talk about other conditions like pica, where human beings eat non-food items like hair or concrete. There was objectophilia, which is when people fall in love with objects. For instance, a woman fell in love with the Eiffel Tower. Savant syndrome, so people have an injury, so they have a head injury, and after that they have savant abilities, like say for instance, they can perform complicated mathematics. You can give them any date and they will be able to tell you instantly what that day is. Oh, that's a Tuesday, or that was a Wednesday. Things like that. Foreign accent syndrome, another case where perhaps people have had a stroke that's caused brain damage and all of a sudden they're speaking in a foreign accent. Alien hand syndrome, where one of their hands works on its own accord, so they are not in control of the things that their hand does. And for instance, when they go to bed at night, they have to strap their hand down to make sure that they don't strangle themselves in their sleep. Or Alice in Wonderland syndrome, which I never heard about before, wherein you believe parts of your body are bigger or smaller than they actually are, but you are able to visually see that they're not. So you'll go to the mirror and you say, oh, my head's its normal size, but for some reason you feel as though your head is 10 times its size. So they were, like I said, it was entertaining. It's just a bit of fun to learn about all these different conditions that human beings have experienced. There are some grotesque ones though, so if you're squeamish with anything that's to do with the medical kind of things, this book wouldn't be for you, but it was entertaining. Then I read this middle grade book, which is Neon's Secret Universe. I think the cover is super cute. This is very young middle grade, so I'd say this would be for 8-year-olds. There are a lot of illustrations in this book, so it is illustrated. The writing is really big, and basically it's about a young girl who has gone to a new place, moved into a new house. Her parents are very odd and quirky. They are opening a rat cafe. That's right, a rat cafe. And she doesn't know how to fit in. So she decides, maybe I need to change all my clothing to black so I don't stand out. And she's just trying to figure herself out. And while she's in her new bedroom, she discovers a hidden compartment that is filled with goo and a green lipstick. And when she writes with the green lipstick, it tears a portal into the universe. So this is a land where unicorns exist. However, they're not the unicorns that we think. So they're humans who look like that, and they have magical abilities that are to do with goo. So what they did was they closed off their world from humans' world because humans were sort of hunting them, and then they misled humans by planting false information about what unicorns actually are. So they made them into horses and such to throw them off their tail. But in this world, yeah, they use goo, so it's very goo based. I think it is trying to appeal to younger kids and their fascination with slime. Basically, the goos do different things, but for me, this was just not entertaining. It was not well written. There was no real danger or anything in this book, so it is not threatening in any way. It's not scary in any way. So like I said, this is definitely younger middle grade. This wasn't for me whatsoever, but I think really young kids would enjoy it. The next book I read was called Did You Say Something, Susan? So this is a non-fiction book basically trying to teach women how to be more assertive, how to speak up, use their voice, improve their confidence, their posture, and how they interact with the world to stand up for themselves and I thought it was very helpful. It's basically like a workbook. So it's not so much a nonfiction that you read, it's something that has activities that you do. So there are tons of real life examples of when you perhaps need to speak up for yourself. So say advocating for yourself with a medical professional, an instance where you have gotten work done and it's not good and you want them to either improve the work or issue you a refund. So it's real life everyday examples of when you might have to, I don't want to say engage in conflict, but speak up and say something. And it involves not just obviously with businesses and retailers and co-workers, but also friends and family, acquaintances, like any interaction you could possibly have with another human being. The language in the book is direct, it's no frills, it's just saying what it is. I did think it was good and it was helpful. It's one of those things I think a lot of women sometimes do struggle with asserting themselves and making a scene, but it's not making a scene. Even though I've gotten a lot better at speaking up rather than staying quiet to avoid, causing a fuss, I still sometimes struggle. It's like in my nature not to be confronting, but like I said, it's something I've overcome. But there was one part in there when they just say that if someone's giving you passive aggressive comments, to say, what do you mean by that? That sounded like an insult. Was it meant to be one? That's something that I definitely need to start doing, because I have the instances where people say that and I just let it slide. But when you do that, it does bother you. So from now on, if someone does say something that is passive aggressive or a veiled insult, I will say, what exactly did you mean by that when you said such and such? Could you explain to me? So I enjoyed it, and it was a good refresher to really, stand my ground and use my throat, use my voice, Then I read Radiant Rest. So this is a book about yoga nidra. So it includes practices, a practice to do, which has poses, pranayama, sankalpa, mantras, and then additional elements like it might have a moon-based ritual or things involving water and fire, so some kind of activity attached to it. Then there are journal prompts that go with these practices, as well as sometimes a recipe. So say like a bedtime practice, they've included a sleepy milk recipe. It also had lovely illustrations in it. There was one part that I really resonated with. So they were talking about making a Nidra nest. So I've been to classes before where they encourage you to get blankets and bolsters and I'm heavy weighted eye masks and pillows and all this sort of thing. And the part that got me was how they said that sometimes women will do the least for themselves. They'll be like, oh, I don't need all that. It's fine. I can just make do with just the bolster. And I was one of those people. I thought, oh, I don't need to go and do all that stuff for myself. I can just lie here with nothing on the floor. I'll just stay in Shavasana or in this pose without any added luxury comforts. And I was like, God damn it, I need to do the most for myself. I need to build my Nidra nest and give myself all of that luxury and comfort, because they said that these same women, if they were asked to build a nest for somebody else, they pulled out all the stops. They got everything that person could possibly need, but then they gave themselves nothing. So that was something that was like, that hit. I'm like, yes, I need to stop doing the least for myself and actually do the most. Just because I can get by with the least doesn't mean that should be my default setting, If I have the time and the ability to really pamper myself and take care of myself and nurture myself, I should. So I really enjoyed that book. I thought it was a good book. It does also have a link to audio versions, obviously, of the practices, because as much as it's good to like read, okay, do this, like that doesn't help me in the moment. If I want to sit down and do the exercise, I just want to be able to lie there and listen to it and follow it that way rather than having to get up and keep reading. So there are also a link to recorded practices that go along with the book. And then I read the Marquess and I. This was a Stacy Reid novel. Once again, it was one I did not like. I don't even really remember it. I just remember I gave it 3 stars. So it was okay. There was nothing amazing about it, but yeah, it's absolutely gone from my memory. I think I read it right at the start of last week and I've already forgotten it, but it was just not a good one. So I haven't had much luck in finding another 5-star one. I think I might have to really read all of the synopses of her books and try and find one that really sounds like a slow burn, one that has substance, one where the characters are intelligent and capable, independent of one another, and see if I can find another bloody 5-star one. But that one was not for me. And then I read Immortal Longings by Chloe Gong. Sorry, my legs are dying. And so this book, I see, has gotten a lot of negative reviews and comments, but I thought I still want to give it a go. I did end up giving it 3 stars, so it was very middle of the road. The premise sounded fascinating. So you've got a world which seems like more of a modern world. It's a very congested place where people are just stacked up upon one another in these sort of like big monster buildings, and it's polluted, and there's a class divide, and basically every year you get to compete in this tournament where you have to kill all the other competitors, and whoever is the last survivor wins money. And in this case, in this world, it's controlled by a monarchy, and in this land there was a infamous princess who slaughtered her entire royal family because she decided that monarchies need to be done away with. And then she killed everybody except her uncle. Her uncle got away, so he's now the ruler. He has an adopted son who's set to become king after him. And basically the princess is still alive and well, and she decides to join the trials so that she can win, get close to the king and knock him off, finish her job. And the crown prince is also kind of thinking about committing treason. And then you've got a third player who, for his own reasons, also wants to get into the royal family to help with a issue that he's got going on. In this world is also body jumping. So this is when it got really messy. So basically, the stronger your chi, the better at a body jumping you are, even though it's illegal, whereas pretty much you jump into somebody else's body and then you can jump back in. It's limited by distance to the new body, and it depends on whether that person is stronger than you, whether you can control them and stay in the body. So the issue with this book really was the execution. It was just not done well. It was confusing. Some things didn't make sense. There were some interesting parts, some things were revealed that are very heavily foreshadowed, so you can kind of tell what's going on, especially with the whole body jumping thing. Already you're sus about everybody. The romance in it was just not for me. I didn't feel it. I didn't feel the connection between the two people. I didn't feel anything. So it was, when I'm not buying the romance and then there's sex scenes, I'm just like, oh, no. So I didn't love it. It was okay, but like I said, the way it was all executed just didn't hit for me. You know, it was a bit subpar. At times the pacing was a bit off. It was okay. It was fast paced and then it was slow paced. There is a cat involved. I wanted more of the cat. But yeah, I just found myself not caring about any of the characters whatsoever. They're all brutal. They're all killers. So none of the characters in this book are actually likable. I won't even call them grey. It's like real dark grey, because they were just slicing and dicing everybody without a care. They just don't care. They don't care who they're killing, and they're all just jumping into anybody's bodies, including children's. So there's just like no consent in this book whatsoever. And yeah, it wasn't for me. And then I read My Roommate is a Vampire. I gave this 3 stars. Guys, this is so cheesy. It's cheesy, it's corny, it's not really believable. You've got a woman down on her luck who ends up accepting a Craigslist ad for a roommate. So she goes to this place because it's so cheap. It's like suspiciously cheap. When she gets there, there's a dude who's dressed in very dated clothing but is so hot. Like, oh my God, he's so hot. Basically, they even reference Buffy and Angel. They watch the show together. This guy has been asleep for 100 years and has just woken up, so he's not acclimated to the current, society and civilization, and he needs help really, reintroducing himself into the world. It was just, like I said, the dialogue was really inauthentic. His speech was muddled. Like, is he really from 100 years ago? Because sometimes he's sounding modern, sometimes he's not. His inner monologue was really cringy, and their romance, like they wrote each other notes, but it was just, I don't know, it just didn't feel real, it just felt made up, if that makes sense. So I didn't really like it, to be honest. Like, it was okay, but it was nothing special. So would I recommend this one? Probably not. Like, unless you just want a really dumb, quick, cheesy story about a chick making out with an old vampire, who's very antiquated, and he's a gentleman, even though in the past he was like debaucherous. Like, in the past, there was a bit where he's hinting at not only did he bang men and women, but animals, like non-humans. There was like something about like that, and I'm like, wait, are you saying are you referencing bestiality, or are you saying like there's other beings out there that aren't humans that you had sex with? I don't understand what you were saying just then. But all of a sudden, like, he's done a 180 now. He's like very chaste, and I'm like, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. Yeah, like I said, it was inconsistent and wasn't for me. So it was a 3-star. It's not bad. It just wasn't my flavor. And then I read Mythos. So this was an audiobook narrated by Stephen Fry, who's an excellent narrator. I absolutely loved hearing him narrate, and I gave this 4.5 stars. So if you are looking for an introduction to Greek mythology, this is what I would recommend. It's done in a way that it's accessible, it's understandable, it's not overwhelming, so it's not giving you too much information, but it's giving you enough to give you a bit more than basic understanding of Greek mythology and all the players and how they intertwine and how they and the relationships between them. And like, Greek mythology is messy. Like, there is a lot of incest. There's a lot of incest going with brothers and sisters and children and parents. It's messy. So I loved it. Like, it was humorous as well. There was some humor put into it, because sometimes Greek mythology can be real dry, and it can be a lot too, just even with their names alone. I know non-Greek speakers can have trouble with their names and it's confusing who's who, but there were some parts that I even had forgotten about, some players that I'd forgotten about. So it was even educational for me. I'm like, oh, okay, that's who that is, and that's how that correlates, and that's the family tree situation happening there, and that's their story and what that pertains to and what lesson that was trying to teach humans. So I enjoyed it, and I think, yeah, if you're looking for introduction to Greek mythology, or you just want a bit of a more fun spin, then I would recommend this series by Stephen Fry, because I think he's got plenty of books. Like, I'm not going to read any more. I just wanted to see what it was like. It was entertaining and informing at the same time. So well done. And then I read a book called Body Friend. So I just found this on, I think it's BorrowBox. So it wasn't even an ebook. It wasn't sent to my reader. So I had to read it on my iPhone, which I don't like to do. But the cover grabbed my attention, and it said it was a book about a woman's sort of battle with chronic illness and friendship. So this was lovely. So as a woman who lives in Melbourne, who has chronic illnesses, I could relate. It was very relatable. And in this book, you have a woman who, once again, lives in Melbourne in Australia. So the place was very anchoring for me. Like, she lists places by name, and I'm like, oh yeah, been there. And she has chronic illness. She's in a long-term relationship, and she ends up forming 2 friends. So the friends' names are Frida, and I believe that she is meant to represent Frida Kahlo, and Sylvia, who's meant to represent Sylvia Plath. And basically they epitomize the 2 sorts of things to do with managing chronic illness. So one is rest, which was Sylvia. Her friend Sylvia was rest, taking a break, taking it easy, not doing anything. And then you've got Frida, who was active recovery, so exercise in this case. She would do swimming, and that would help her condition, help manage her pain and her symptoms and put her in a better mood. And it was just the oscillating between the 2, where you are actively trying to manage your condition and you are doing the most to lessen the symptoms, and then those other moments where you just end up not being able to do anything and you just have to accept. And you sort of can sometimes, in that place of rest, you can sometimes slip into a bit of depression and overwhelm and hopelessness. But sometimes that rest can also be beneficial and restorative and nurturing. But it was just well done. The writing was beautiful. The book is repetitive and cyclical, and I think that's because chronic illness is repetitive and cyclical. Cyclical? I don't actually know how to pronounce that word. You're going to have times where you have flare-ups and have times where you go into remission, and it is just a roller coaster ride. And I thought that this really represented that well. So maybe people who don't have chronic illnesses might not find it, that engaging or that much of a resonance with it, but for me, I did. So I was like, okay, yes, that's encapsulated what it is like, and the internal monologue that goes on with it, and how it affects your relationships with others, and how it affects you even wanting to partake in the world at large or hide yourself away in your cave. It was great. So I think I gave it 4 stars because it wasn't like a feel-good book, but it was a book that was very relatable. So that was Body Friend. And I think those were all the books that I read in this little week period. So that is everything. So I actually had some really good reads this week, surprisingly. But until next time, stay wild, Star Child.